Welcome and thank you for joining us in the session Patient-Led Innovations, moderated by Dr. Shanthipriya Shiva, Head of SAAR Foundation and Young Onset Parkinson's Warrior.
Good evening, everybody, and I welcome you all for the topic Patient-Led Innovations. Patients with chronic diseases develop useful innovations to help them cope with the disorder and improve their quality of life, which may range from simple tools for everyday living to sophisticated solutions. But only some of them are shared, maybe because of lack of infrastructure, social stigma, lack of contact within the community where they are useful. Is the patient voice heard among the various stakeholders? Is the patient experience and expertise taken into account? To ponder upon these and more, we have a wonderful lineup of speakers today. I welcome Dr. Archana Sharada, who is a diabetic specialist who founded Udan 15 years ago with a mission to empower underprivileged children with type 1 diabetes. She has adopted more than 800 kids from rural area of Marathwada and believes that education and policy change as a core game changers. Her works includes invention of an earthen pot to store insulin, rural teaching tools, and the first ever visual learning book for families with type 1 diabetes. She currently leads the National RSSDI Type 1 Diabetes Task Force. I welcome Mr. Siddharaju, who is a tech operator in Accenture and has been living with type 1 diabetes for over 14 years. And I welcome Yukiko Nishimura, who is the president and founder of Nambio ASRID, Advocacy Service for Rare and Intractable Diseases, which works as an intermediary organization, and it is committed to providing valuable services systems for connecting and creating multiple stakeholders related to its field. I now welcome Dr. Archana Sharada to present on how children with diabetes receive treatment via a system of insulin storage adapted to rural settings in India. Over to you, Dr. Archana.
Thank you so much, Shanthipriya. It's an absolute pleasure to be here, especially representing the patients who we love so much, all the type 1 community of type 1 diabetes in India. I will just share slides. Yes, am I visible and audible? Both clear? Hello?
Yes, we can. You can see you and we can hear you. Thank you.
Okay. So the next 10 minutes, I'll just take you through a very, very small, but a very simple, a very small, a very rural, very ethnic, very in-house innovation that saved lives in our part of the country in India, where I'm based, which is the Marathwada region of Maharashtra, which is the most backward part. And we are a lot of villages where the nearest doctor is, say, 100 kilometers or 60 kilometers away. And this innovation and how it impacted the lives of hundreds of children and the joy that came with it is something that I would like to share here. So UDAN is an organization, as we mentioned, that we founded 15 years ago for children who were living in villages and there were no healthcare providers or source of support for insulin, glucometers, strips, etc. To just set the context right, type 1 diabetes is different from type 2 diabetes. We have been talking about NCDs today and yesterday in the entire Congress, and it's a lifelong condition occurring mostly in children, although it can happen at any age. But the child's body stops producing insulin. So it's absolutely necessary to take insulin injections many times a day for survival and growth. Of course, there are many, many other things involved, but for today's purpose, we're going to talk about just this aspect that the insulin injection is essential for survival and growth. So this is something we have to keep in mind. But when it comes to so many challenges, for many families in the region we come from in Uran, it's like choosing whether we can have an education or a meal, or can we work, or can we save a child's life, because it is just too expensive. So the challenge comes with low income, low literacy, low access to healthcare. The girl in this picture is Usha. She lives in the Lonar crater, the second largest crater in the world. And it's a wonder. It's archaeological, meteorological wonder. But this girl, this is her home where we went to visit her had dinner there. And we saw how she actually managed her type 1 diabetes. Now, in this challenge, there is a very specific challenge for insulin. So first of all, how do you make insulin available? Now, as an organization, as an NGO, and through various organizations, suppose we have made insulin available, then it's education. So there's a huge challenge. How do you educate people how to take insulin, how to do everything else? Because it's not just giving insulin, obviously. Okay, suppose that challenge is met as well. Then the third challenge is, how do you cool insulin? Because for insulin to have appropriate action, a person who is using it needs to be educated, as well as needs insulin to be stored at a certain temperature. Now, with this challenge in mind, there was a huge puzzle. So this little boy is called Suraj. His mom and Suraj, she's a contract labor worker, which means that they work for 6 months on the farm and they get a certain amount of money at the end of 6 months. They can't move. So they actually live in the field, they work in the field. And this child has type 1 diabetes. Now, Suraj, we had a huge surprise. We were working and we were wondering what is happening. Every summer, it was not just Suraj, it was hundreds of children like Suraj. But every summer, the blood sugar levels shot up. Now, the increasing the doses of insulin, yet the effect was not what we were expected. So there's a certain effect one would expect with the increase of dose, which was just not happening. And we realized that so many more children were getting admitted to hospitals, especially for diabetes ketoacidosis, which is a life-threatening emergency in children with type 1 diabetes. Also, the rural children were not doing so well as compared to the urban. The urban were not getting that much hospitalized. The insulin was working with them, and it was not happening in the rural environment. And that puzzle led to a lot of introspection and what is really happening, what is happening at the other end. And that is what Uran tried to find. And then started our visits to Usha at the Lonar crater and so many other children. This was the kitchen of the home where children with type 1 diabetes were living. It's a mud house and there's a tin roof on the top. It's right bang in the middle of a field. The temperatures in summer can soar up to 40 degrees. And there was no refrigerator, obviously. There was no electricity in this case. There were some homes who did have electricity, but the power cuts were there. And they were pretty long power cuts. So even if they managed to scrape and save and have a refrigerator, the electricity didn't last long enough to keep their insulin cool. And they were actually living on fields in little huts because they were working day and night as laborers of the fields. So what does one do? So what should ideally happen? What is the official cooling method for insulin? So it should be a refrigerator at home. There are cool pouches, the Fryo pouches, or so many other pouches available for travel. They need money. You need money for these things, and you need electricity, right? I mean, it sounds very obvious thing to do, but it's not so obvious when it comes to the kind of homes that we are talking about.
Dr. Archana, we lost you.
Yeah.
Dr. Archana, I think we've frozen there. Moderator, could you raise her up again?
Dr. Archana?
Okay. Moderator, if you can, we can move on to the next speaker, if you can bring him back.
Okay. So sorry for the technical glitch. We will come back to Archana a little later. And now I invite Mr. Siddharaju on his journey as a child to access type 1 diabetes treatment in India. Over to you, Mr. Siddharaju.
Thank you, Shanthipriya ma'am, for this opportunity for giving me to share my story. Hi everyone, I'm Siddharaju of 24 age, and I'm living with my type 1 diabetes for the last 14 years. So my journey was started in the year 2006. When I was only 10 years old. During my birthday, it was all started in Dasara season, actually. Some of the days were so risky and I was feeling so weak. Day by day, I used to lose my weights and all. And no one has known like what is happening with me. And my father and mother also didn't know. Like they were thinking like something bad, negative energy is entered into my body or something evil is there in my body. Like that, they were thinking because they are all village people and they are not studied well. My father is working as a painter, a coolie worker, and my mother is a homemaker. That's it. So initial days I was drinking warm water and doing warm bedwets at night. So this came into the notice of my dad, and he was thinking like, being a 10-year-old person, why are you doing bedwets and all? He was scolding me, and I didn't know why the dad is scolding me because it was not fault of mine. I didn't know what's happening with me until neighbor. She was the person who initiated my father to take me to the hospital. Uh, when my father took me to the hospital, the doctor only gave glucose for 2 days, which is like they were saying some illness or some weak in the body. So that's why they gave me glucose for 1 week. After 1 week, they insisted my father to bring me back. So that didn't also work. After 1 week, he checked my pulse rate and he was saying that the pulse rate is too less of the kid and he should be shifted to ICU ward in nearby nursing home or in a good hospital. So after my father took me to Indira Gandhi Institute of Children's Health, which is a good hospital, which saved my life. So I feel so lucky, like I've been treated in a good time and in a good sense where it was a uh, time which I need help of medications. So 2006 September 26 is the first time which I was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. Initial days were so risky for my father to attend my medical expenses. He has done so much of debts with his friends and all to satisfy my medications, and doctors were insisted me, my father and mother, to take a lot of care of me and give a food like diet conditions, and they were giving insulins which were from this medical thing, but medical expenses were so high during the time. After a week, they discharged me, and my mother and father was not even ready to give me insulin because they were so scared of injections. Why should we give injections to a small kid daily and daily? Like they were not even know what is diabetes and what is the definition of diabetes. They didn't even know like that. Then my uncle and aunt, they were the only two person and only two hopes of my life who took care of me for 1 year, and they only give me so much of support and insulin. They provided day by day insulin for me, and they only taught me how to take insulin. Um, Before that, I want to notice a point like I didn't have any test strips or how to check glucose level. We didn't have any equipments because of some expenses. So then doctors have given the urine ketone test strips where we should check our glucose levels from the urine samples. So from that we were checking the glucose levels. In some time, my father's friend, a lawyer, he insisted my father to Gnana Sanjeevani Medical Institute of Children's Health. That's the place where I will be like very much thankful for that institution where I got free medicines and education. In 2011, a CDSE program was introduced where I met Sri Kantaya sir, who is a god for my life, for saving my life. He gave me psychological support, and he supported me in various fields. Like for me, education and insulin were must, but my father and mother are not even able to, like what you can say, satisfy my needs because of their poverty line. So in CDIC program, I got free test strips, free medicines, and education help in way of scholarships. From my 7th standard to till I finished degree with BCom graduated guy, till that time I got free scholarships based on my ranking. So where like monthly I used to go for hospital at first Sunday, and I meet so much of children who are gathering there, and they were so happy to see the hospital and premises because of the people of the same age are gathering there with a lot of happiness, because there are like doctors are like friends. They were counseling freely and giving so much of advices which were so helpful for the people's life. CDSE program helped me so much, and during calcified track, I met a friend like Ajay. He was a good guy, and he was talking like 5 languages at a time. I can remember him. In like 2 years back, he died because of infections. So these are the things which are not good for a type 1 guy, because here what I want to say is, what I want to give a message is the proper way of diagnosis and proper education should be given to a type 1 guy in the society. Lack of education about type 1 and proper medications at a time is the two things which is affecting the people. So this can be reduced by like this kind of sessions and creating awareness. So if these kinds of things will be taken care, then every person in the India with type 1 will be a successful person in life like me. And I am working as an Accenture employee, leading a healthy life, and I can what you can say, I can meet my expenses of medications on my own. So these are all the things which are really helpful for me, because all these things were given me at the right time. The education about type 1 and how to be aware, and the support, psychological support and physical support from background or doctors. These are the things
Thank you.
which I
Th-
wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you, moderator. We've lost
Yeah, we
again.
lost again.
Again, so could you go to Yukiko Nishimura?
Thank you,
Thank you.
Siddharaju, for sharing your journey and the challenges and you faced during your journey. So I hope it's a lesson for other people so that they will learn, and we have more of education and awareness programs for not only type 1 diabetes, but other diseases too. Thank you. Now we will go to Yukiko Nishimura on her advocacy work on the rare diseases field in Japan. Over to you, Mrs. Yukiko.
So can you see my slide?
Yeah, it's visible.
Yeah,
Okay.
yes, we can. Thank you, Yukiko.
Thank you. Okay, so let's get started.
Yukiko, are you jamming? Are we losing you? Moderator, we're having one of those days.
Yeah,
So,
everybody's
okay.
facing a network issue, I think so.
Okay, should be okay. Okay. Yukiko, could you bring back again?
Yukiko, we are not
Hello.
able to hear you. Archana's back again. So we'll
Okay.
continue
Yes,
with Archana now.
Yeah, go back to Achina from there. Thank you.
I'm so sorry for that interruption. We had a huge breakdown in the area. I'll just continue from where we stopped.
Okay.
And um, okay, so we were talking about cooling, and the people were cooling it under the matka. They were wrapping it in a wet cloth. They were immersing their insulin in a water bucket or inside a hole in the earth, or there was no cooling at all. So that the need there was to have a non-contaminated way, because the bottle of the insulin would get contaminated with dust and mud and used water with all splashed all over it. And we needed a stable cooling temperature. So at Udan, everyone, all our type 1 children, their parents got together, and we really were thought, what can we do about it? And first thought was it has to be very, very low cost. Second, it has to be locally available. We are not in a position to import things and get things from elsewhere. Then it should not use electricity. And lastly, because as a team, we needed some scientific validation. We could just not say use this. And the solution was now absolutely urgent. So everyone put their hands together, heads together, and brainstormed, and we had all kinds of thoughts and research. And finally, what came out was something very, very simple. And this is the earthen insulin cooler. So this is a clay pot. As you can see, the outer clay pot, and there's an inner clay pot. The shape is conical because that increases the maximum surface area. As we know, the more the surface area, the more will be the evaporation. And then there is fine sand. It is coarse and fine mixed between the two clay pots. This sand increases the entire evaporative process. So the earthen pot is evaporating the water which is going to be put in the sand, the outer pot as well, and the sand creates multiple evaporative surfaces, increasing the cooling. The lid is either an earthen lid, which we made initially, but in case it got broken or could not be made, a simple cotton cloth for cover was more than adequate. What was needed to cool this to the temperature that we wanted were just 3 glasses of water a day. So the water was to be poured into the sand, kept on a stand, as you can see, and in a shady place where it was breezy. And that is all it took to bring insulin to the temperature that was required. The cost was less than 100 rupees, which was less than $2. This is possible to be made in every village of India, because earthen pot is something we all store our water in. So there are potters everywhere from north, east, west, south of India. So this can be made locally. No electricity was required. And then we did a very robust scientific validation with a series of tests inside the pot, outside the pot. And we studied it till 40 degrees Celsius was the outside temperature, which is the average temperature in the Deccan belt, which is the extreme to which it goes in the summertime. So what happened? What was the transformation? Dramatically, we had reduced hospitalization. So it was not just about a pot and it could cool, but that insulin started working. And it was then we realized how dramatic it was. Hospitalization reduced. Summers were no longer viewed as death traps, because come summer and it was to be scary that we're going to have lots of children who are probably going to succumb. And rural children suddenly did just as well as the urban ones, the ones who did have electricity. And our lovely children actually survived. More and more children survived. So currently that transformation went on, and today Udan itself has 480 ongoing users. So every year you make a new pot, like you do with the water pot. Every year you get a new pot, so the pores don't get blocked, and it works better. The cooling is good. This is in the villages of Marathwada. What we did was we made a YouTube video. We shared it all over the place. We put it in every possible place so that people could copy it. And this was done by people. I got calls from Africa, from Brazil, so many places. And then it got replicated far and wide. So children who could not afford the refrigerator or have a cooler had a very safe, stable, non-contaminated way of cooling their insulin, and that helped them survive. And that is something we were talking about. She is Deepika, and she lives in a village nearby, and I asked her to send me a photograph, and that is her from her home. That's another child who keeps it in the corner because there's an angan outside, and that keeps the insulin cool. You can see the vials inside. So this is what happened. This was in 2013 on World Health Day that we officially launched it and made it available for everyone who wanted to copy, take, make. There was absolutely no patenting, etc. So children come from villages and they take their pots and we teach them how to make it, and they can make them in their own villages. So the question we have is, why was insulin storage solution not part of our healthcare system? We have insulin as a life-saving drug for type 2 or type 1 or for gestational diabetes, wherever. When insulin is life-saving, when we know it gets denatured at high temperatures, when we know we live in a hot country and summers are not, the room temperature is not good enough to sustain it, and our 70% population is rural with power cuts, then where is the healthcare system which talks about it? Why is storage of insulin and options available to rural, non-affording, low-resource setting not part of the statement made when insulin is prescribed, whether it is the patient or the doctor or the pharmacies or the government? So on this platform, my thought while sharing the innovation is that, of course, we'll find ways. Patients will always find ways to survive and thrive and do well. But why was it not part of the solution offered in the very beginning? So thank you very much. That is what I wanted to say. These are the lovely children from Marathwada. We just heard Sidhu, and there are so many of these warriors and champions across the world, across the country, and especially in low resource setting who have done well. But there are thousands and thousands and thousands more who need this to be a policy change and make them have wonderful, beautiful lives. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Archana, for sharing your wonderful innovation. We have Yukiko, so you can go ahead now.
Thank you so much. At first, I'm very, very sorry. So I'm not sure, but suddenly my PC shut down, and it doesn't seem to be because of the internet line. So it's my first experience, but again, so my apologies. So I'm very worried about start my presentation again. So, okay, can you see?
Yeah, it's visible.
Okay, thank you so much. So, on the last time, so I participated last year. So I participated the first Asian Pacific Patients Congress and made my presentation about my organization. So in this session, so I'd like to further introduce our advocacy effort, especially in Japan. So here's my introduction. So my name is Yukiko Nishimura, the president and founder of NPO Athlete Japan. So my background is academic researcher at the University of Tokyo and Kyoto University and Chimfa and some others. And so I had worked on the Japanese and the Rare Disease Patient Association, named as JPA, for 7 years as the Chief Secretariat of International Relations. And so I'm also the board member of the PPI Japan. So here's today's content. So I'm sure, so there are too much volumes, So sometimes I'd like to skip several slides. So I'd like to introduce the current status on the Nambio rare diseases area. And also I'd like to explain the importance of patient-reported outcome, PRO. And then, so I introduced the case studies and from my side and conclusion. So here's the current status of the rare diseases. So on the presentation from Archana, so diabetes type 1 is also the rare disease. And so we have a lot of friends, of the same diseases, and also patient organizations in Japan. So I'd like to skip, this presentation file, but, so you can see there are so many problems and challenges in this field. And I always use this slide when I present in English. So in Japan, the word of Nambio, so it's commonly used instead of rare disease. The direct meaning of Nambio is difficult disease, and the Nambio law, enacted in 2014, defines Nambio as a rare and intractable and long-term chronic diseases. Therefore, the definition of Nambio is broader than the rare diseases definition. So Japanese government enacted the first Nambio policy in 1972, and the term of Nambio is so familiar to the ordinary Japanese people. And also, there are two hard in this field: hard to recover and hard to live. So since 2015, after the enactment of Nambio law, the number of designated Nambio has increased. Currently, 333 disease clusters are designated as Nambio, and there are approximately 910,000 people who have beneficiary certificates. However, this number is not the total number of patients and doesn't include those with mild symptoms, except for those who require significant treatment costs. And we work with millions of patients and their families in Japan, and 300 million people worldwide with rare diseases. And as you may know, the many parameters of rare diseases area and Nambio are on the rise. For example, establishing diagnosis of Nambio and the number of drugs for Nambio and the number of physicians treating Nambio. So in this context, ESRID works with many stakeholders using patient-reported outcome, PROs. And our nonprofit projects include social awareness activities like the Rare Disease Day and patient group support, of course. And while for-profit projects include, for example, clinical trial design using PRO. Definitely, the importance of patient-reported outcome PRO on Nambio and rare disease field. So you can see the definition of PRO by FDA and NIH. The concept of PRO has just been introduced to Japan. Therefore, efforts to scientifically understand subjective evaluations have just begun in Japan also. There are so many rare diseases and Nambio research and drug development toward a cure. However, rare disease and Nambio patients and families do not stay in the hospital all the time compared to other diseases. It means medical professionals and healthcare professionals are difficult to fully grasp the reality of their lives. So because of this reason, experience, ideas, data, and information from Nambio patients and families are so important. So then I'd like to introduce our cases. This is a result of a survey we conducted on patient perceptions of clinical trials. A total of 151 Nambio patients were asked to describe their image of a clinical trial or the clinical study and to perform in linguistic analysis. So here are the results. We found that those who had participated in a clinical trial had a large vocabulary and many positive words. Let's check the right side. On the other hand, those who had never participated in a clinical trial had less vocabulary and used negative words. These results led to the following conclusion. So collect information that can solve questions to people who have never participated in clinical trials, and always consider the anxiety of persons who participate in clinical trials for the first time. So after the completion of this research, we have communicated our result to people in various stages of development. And specifically, so we have reported our result and exchanging ideas with research and development professionals and healthcare workers. And we organize public lectures in medical conference to provide the basic information about clinical trial and study, and presented our results at awareness events and so on. In other words, we think one of our roles is to provide information from a neutral standing point to those who want to know. It's not limited to the stage of the target audience. So I'd like to continue with the following case study. JREA is the only Nambio area's patient registry in Japan that collects personal information and is managed by patients. With the support of Ministry of Health, the project was launched and has been operation since 2012. From the beginning, the administrative office has included a patient group's leaders. Since 2014, the office has been located inside Airstreet. JREA has been developed across diseases and has implemented collaborations with other registries. So here is a specific case study using JREA. So we conducted a study in partnership with the distal myopathy patient group. Green column is action taken by the patient group leaders. And orange is a researcher's action. And purple is action that's both carried out together. So primarily, it's a researcher who carried out the study itself. However, the patient group leaders were involved from the beginning of the study, and the submission to the ethical committee was prepared by the patient group leaders together. So this means that the patient group leaders have a complete understanding of the research. And after the study began, the results of the researcher's analysis were presented to the patient group leader on a case-by-case basis. Then we performed any additional analysis they desired. Finally, we worked together to come up with an output based on the results obtained. So we made a presentation at the Japan Master Society first, and we also presented at ECRD, this is the European conference this year, and it's selected as a selected poster award. In these presentations, patient group leaders are listed as co-authors, not the acknowledgement area. In order to make the results known to the wider audience, a brochure was prepared and distributed to care on the support provider that do not know the patients with advanced muscle diseases, and in order to inform them about the consideration in advance. So in this way, we are conducting the research with patients as partners, and which cannot be done by patients alone. The target people for these partnerships may not be patients. So finally, I'd like to introduce our ongoing research. Here is a list of surveys conducted by Airstreet on COVID-19. First, a survey of patients and their families was conducted until the end of August. Some of the survey items were used in the EURODIS and European Rare Disease Patient Association survey. And there were approximately 350 respondents, and the analysis were currently underway. A survey of the current status of the patient group is also being conducted until the end of October. Some of the survey items were conducted by APADO an Asian Pacific network of rare disease patients. And the preliminary report of both on the research written in Japanese, unfortunately, has been published on the website. And change in patients and families' sentiment are also being surveyed. This survey is being conducted every month until this month, December. And all responses are free format style. The analysis will be carried out in collaboration with university researchers. So all surveys will be published in English after the completion of these analyses. So please wait for a while. So here is my final slide. I'd like to conclude this presentation and summarize about our approach. So we are always care that identify needs and conduct information collection and analysis in appropriate manner. And we also work with various platforms and projects as an intermediary. So for example, we have collaborated with PPI Japan. So PPI means public and patient involvement. And PPI Japan has been established in the last year. So among the academics, industries, and healthcare professionals, and patient advocacy people. So PPI Japan is cooperation with U-Party, and we operate a forum for knowledge and opinion exchange on PPI. So we like to continue to work with overseas patients and support organizations to consolidate and communicate domestic and international needs. So thank you for your kind attention. So I'm sure my volume is too much. So if you have any questions and comments, so please let me know directly. Thank you so much.
Moderator, your volume is off. Unmute yourself, moderator.
Yeah, sorry. Thank you, Yukiko, for the wonderful presentation, and nice to know about JRARE and how you involve the patients in your country. So we'll go for the, we have a few questions. So first, is there a system in place to assess the unmet needs of the patients? So anybody can answer this question?
In India, I will just go first, that I've been working in this rural space and we did not find a way we could report this. I have been looking for the entire chain. I've been hearing all these organizations, the way Yukiko mentioned. So I was just wondering whether, suppose a child with type 1 diabetes, as Sidhu shared his story, needs insulin, needs to be educated how to take insulin. If we take type 1 as example, needs to store insulin very well, needs to monitor. So within India, you have so many Indias. So a person in a city would probably say, so what's the big deal? I mean, it's simple, just do it. And it's accessible on internet. But a person who is in a village with low resources, with low literacy, has absolutely no clues. And forget about just the resources, financial resources. What about taboos, myths, etc. And who do you report to? So I feel no. The answer is absolutely no. Who did we go to? Who could we blame? Who could we cry to? Who could we appeal? The only solution was innovate and find our own solution.
That's a big question mark for all of us here. I feel to add on this, there's no proper data in India, and there's no proper disease registry.
Yes.
So I feel maybe the pharmaceutical companies, the patient organizations, patient support groups, all the multiple stakeholders should come together and deal with this needs of the patients. So
Right. I
Yukiko-
think that was beautiful how Yukiko meant, you got the people, the patients on board in the study itself. So that is amazing. I mean, that's something probably we can learn from, and
Thank
that
you.
data would make an impact. That was
Yeah, so
beautiful.
the finding unmet needs is not so easy. So as all of us know, so and of course I don't think so. It's on the Japan yet, So we are trying to know their unmet needs by analyzing them with the patient voices and information, you know. So that the free word style, that's a very, very important for us. So we are the researchers. So we can analyze and so we can conduct a survey and the research. And so patient side and patient families, and they have the opinions and data and information and the words. That's very, very important.
Now, so how do we overcome the social stigma faced by the patients? I feel that is the main cause for patients don't come out with their thoughts, and the patient voice is not heard, and there's no patient voice because of the social stigma. How do we overcome that? So anybody can take up some question.
So I think in any society, I can vouch for India for sure. Anything that is different, there is a question mark. There is anxiety, difficult to accept. It's not always a stigma, but anyone who's different, people are wary of what's going to happen. For example, children were taking insulin shots in school. The other children were wary of them. Can we share a tiffin? Will we get diabetes if we share the same tiffin? Or the teachers were very scared that what happens if this child faints in school? Are we responsible? Are we liable? So I think all the stigmas regarding marriage with type 1, in our work with type 1, come from ignorance. So for me, there's a very simple solution to stigma is knowledge. Essentially, people are positive, people are good, they want to accept what is there, but they are just ignorant. So a lot of noise, lot of conversation, lot of media talk, lot of champions like Sidhu kind of people who stand up and say, yes, I have type 1 diabetes and I have a great life. So a lot of noise and advocacy and a lot of education, maybe having it in the school curriculum. So what if we had the rare disease chapter in the school, in the primary section, in 5th grade or 6th grade? Wouldn't that be wonderful? That would just take away the stigma totally.
Yes.
Is there a stigma
Course,
in
and
Japan?
I actually agree with Shraddha ma'am, because I've faced these things in my school days, because so many of my friends and teachers also were scared when I was taking insulin and all. But after knowing my problem, they came to know like this is gonna be the medicine for diabetes, like that. They have asked me. Till then, they were not knowing, like they were thinking like insulin is not there, and the ultimate medicine for diabetes is only tablets. But they didn't know about insulin.
Yes.
That's what
Just Yukiko, could you answer that as well?
Yes, of course. So this is the very, very difficult problem. And so at times, patients with other diseases may not be aware of their stigmas. And so at the universities where I worked, the University of Tokyo, so there is a researcher doing a study called self-support study. So telling the patient's own story about their own experiences may also help you and us to understand the stigma and go beyond it. And so every year, so we have organized a Rare Disease Day. And so we are the secretariat office of all Japanese official events. So all events, have been trying to invite the patients and the families. And so to try to speak, the spread their voices. So such kind of testimonials are also be understood by the ordinary people, I guess. However, the stigma area is very, very difficult problems. And so we are very care about that.
Thank you very much. I think that was good. I think the other, for my, work, as I say, that there's human behavior can be changed through certain things. And I think one is primarily is through education. And then I think that knowledge that comes in. But then really changing the attitude and then belief, I think it's a little bit challenging. I think those are the ones that really, if we have a belief system that really treats disease and patients with disease discriminately, those are difficult to move on. But then on the side of, as a society, I think we have to now make a decision on this. Do we work, try to move things slowly, or do we use what I call the nuclear option, which is through legislation and enforceable legislation that's enforced? So in the European Union, I think what happened was we actually tolerated schools discriminating against people, then you had employers discriminating against people, then you had insurance companies discriminating people. And all this discrimination, we talked for the last 50 years, you know, as I said, the Second World War, there was a change of ideas and all that. And when we realized that this is not moving things forward, we went for the nuclear option, which is legislation. And the Disability Rights Act in the UK, other acts that are there, then some of the European Union directives for employment employers, they came in. And I think seeing those implemented really, really moved things. I mean, schools now think twice before they even say anything. And that, I think, is what we may need to look at if we want to move things forward in many of the Asia-Pacific countries, that we are ripe now. We have done all the talking, we have done all the walking. We hope that things change, but unfortunately, this has not happened. So we may need to look at more tougher, aggressive means of advocacy. But at the same time, we must remember that patient advocates like ourselves do have a very good position to play as role models, that we need to appear very calm in the, almost like not be provoked by the silliness and the insults we get. And, you know, and if we stay calm, play silent and work hard, we can go a long way further. And I think I really liked what Siddharaju said. I think I could relate to him as a young kid, and you see how what happens. I know many patients, and I think one of the things that we really need to address, I think, long-term in Asia-Pacific is the spiritual element of it and some of the belief systems. I think if you are supposed to be born with these conditions because you've committed some kind of insult to somebody in the past life, that's a very difficult one to argue. I'm happy to see that in the marriages and future romantic side of things, those are moved on classically. I think Facebook, thank you, Facebook, for bringing us together.
On social media.
Yeah, it's what I always quote, you know, Facebook can't be that bad. You've met.
True.
Yeah, they used to say, you know, like there's a Urdu shire based in Delhi, I suppose, as I would say. And Ghalib used to say, "Eva is not to charcha karta hai ek qiyamut ka, yahan har roz nigahein milti hai aur har roz qiyamut hoti hai." Meaning, a priest, you just have one end of the world, qiyamut. But here, every day we meet people, we see people, and we die every day, and we face rebirth. So that's what is happening, I think, from that. And I think intermediate innovation that you brought out, Archana, was very good. I think that really brought. And the last, I think I'll leave the last comment to Shanthipriya, because she gave us a very good idea that she's working in fashion towards developing the
Yes.
ultimate sari for people with Parkinsons. I think that would be absolutely brilliant. Please do look at her collection. I think she's lovely collections. We'll share those photos later on.
Yeah.
And,
So maybe in the next Congress, I will be talking about the fashion.
Yeah, bring a suitcase full.
Yeah, sure.
You'll pay your taxi fare back. Thank you very much. And thank you everybody for staying late. We'll end the session a little bit early so that you can all take a break, and then we will reassemble for the closing ceremonies. But we have one more session coming after this, and that's a session from closing keynote from Thomas Quinney, who is the head of IFPMA. He's IFPMA and IAPO, two non-state actors in official relationship with WHO. Thomas Quinney has some very good news to share with us. More vaccines are on the way being licensed. Also more other areas, and he wants to talk about how to make this affordable with COVAX facility. And he has something very good for us to close this year. And so I would ask everybody, please take a little break, then come back in another 15 or so minutes. Thank you very much, and take care.
Thank
Bye.
you. Thank you, Kavaldeep. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Shanthipriya. Yukiko, bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Priya. Thank you, Archana.